You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program, a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew. Hello, Write Project fans. We're here today to get the thoughts and feelings on writing and Newfoundland writer culture from author Shannon Green. Shannon Green is a gifted author with a talent for the strange and has been recognized in both the genre community and the contemporary literary community for his pursuits. In the past, he has been shortlisted for the 1996 Arts and Letters Award and has as well won the 2015 Audience Choice Steampunk Newfoundland Showcase. Green has received praise for his stories The Wine Dark Sea in Chillers from the Rock, as well as his stories in Fantasy from the Rock, Dystopia from the Rock, The Hamthology, and the just-released Flights from the Rock with his new story, Sadie's Mechanical Bird, a steampunk story perfectly capturing the excitement of early flight. Thank you for joining us, Shannon.
You too.
What literary pilgrimages have you gone on, if any?
Whenever I travel, I try to write, and my wife and I were fortunate enough to have use of a cabin where we would often go to just write. It was just a house in a small town here in Newfoundland where we could just go disconnect from everything. The nearest internet we had access to was a 10-minute drive away, so we were totally isolated. And if she was working on something and I was working on something, we'd often just go there for the quiet and the freedom to write without being bothered.
That sounds really nice.
It was.
Yeah.
It was really nice. We just can't use the place anymore.
That's really interesting. Shannon, what are common traps for aspiring authors?
From what I've seen, it's the pay to publish, where the companies will trick you into thinking, oh, we're going to do everything for you, and you end up having to pay just for everything on your own, and the publishing company does nothing to help you out. I understand there's investment involved on both sides, but if a company is saying, yeah, we'll publish X number of books for Y number of dollars, that's not a publishing company, that's a printer.
Yeah, you're right. That is a huge problem. That is my top number one most hated thing in the industry right now happening.
And it is a big problem because you think you're getting published. And if you go into it thinking, okay, I need to find a printer with your eyes open, great.
Yeah.
Printer can brand, you charge based on their rates. But if you go in thinking, I've got a publisher, and all their support is, we need more money from you, that really isn't a publisher. That's the taxi driver who picks you up and expects you to drive the car and then pay him too.
Yeah, it very much is the tail wagging the dog, for lack of a better word. And in addition to that, it creates this problem where if the author doesn't know better, they go out into the world now thinking they're published, and they go to author events and signings and group events demanding to be treated like an author. And anyone there who knows the difference, who's been in the industry, has to kind of be the person to go, oh, no, here's why it's different. And it creates this very weird imbalance.
It is. And it does create a weird divide where they think they're not big house published, but they think they're a published author, and really they're an indie author or
which is
a
fine.
self-pub author. Totally fine.
Just know what you are.
I have no problem with those. Just, like you said, know who you are, know what side of this divide you're on.
Yep. Shannon Green, would you ever consider writing under a pseudonym?
Yes. I don't know what the pseudonym would be, but I do have topics that I want to approach that I wouldn't feel as comfortable approaching just based on family members, friends. And the other side is I wouldn't want to put something. I do aim for PG-13 in most of my stories. I'm afraid some of my younger family members will read it. If I want to do something that's a bit more advanced in age than that and don't want my nieces especially to pick it up because they do try to read everything I write,
okay,
I'm going to need a different name on that, at least for the next 10 years until the youngest of them is old enough to read some of the more adult content.
It could be some really cheeky thing like Fen and Black.
It could be.
Yeah.
I'd like to go with something a bit better, but it could be.
That's such a polite way to say no.
Oh, I thought that was kind of mean.
No, not. Do you try to be more original when you're writing, or are you trying to deliver on genre expectations for the reader?
I'm neither. I'm just trying to tell the story I want to read. Like, yes, there's expectations within genre that I will try not to go too far outside of, but I don't want to be bound by that either. And I think I've read enough over the years that if it's something I want to read, it's something other people will want to read. So I feel like I'm sounding really pretentious, but I try not to follow any of those rules for genre and rules for how story is told. I try to focus on telling the best story I can that I would want to read.
No, that's really fair, and that's the approach I have as well. Sometimes it can really bite you, though, like with Touch Your Nose as a recent spy novel that I put out. It's really more of an anti-spy novel, but I've got no choice but to market it on Amazon as a spy novel. So about 70 or 60% of the people that pick it up might be a bit put off by it when they read it. But that remaining 40%, if they get it, I've got a reader for life then.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to get the 25% as more things by me come out. But I know I'm going to get that 75% who are just like, why did this guy ever put ink to a paper?
Yeah.
What is wrong with him? How did this get published anywhere?
Absolutely. What was the best money you ever spent as a writer?
Honestly, getting a library card.
I like that.
It was no money. It's access to countless volumes of research, both for how to write, what other people are getting published with. If you download the right app, you can even get audiobooks on your phone that you can take anywhere. So if you're doing something as simple as weeding the garden, you can put on a book and just always be reading. And to me, that is one of the better ways to learn how to write, is to see how other people write and just take in those story ideas, and then they go into the back of your brain and become your own story when it comes out. And so the best investment for any good writer, anyone who wants to be a good writer, I think, is a library card.
I agree.
Because free books forever.
Okay, I agree. Perfect. What was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
I grew up in Newfoundland. I think I've always known that.
That's fair.
My grandfathers were both involved in politics to a greater or lesser extent, so I've seen just the ability to win people over with oration and through well-written pieces. And plus, growing up in Newfoundland, we've always played with words. I grew up in a small town where the guy on the wharf would be extolling just massive pieces of wisdom and quoting Shakespeare, even though he dropped out of school in grade 5 to go fishing. It's in the air here when you listen to people, and it's hard not to pick up on what you can do with words when you live somewhere that people honestly enjoy language and play with it to the extent we do here.
I like that. Shannon, are there any important mailing lists or blogs or magazines that writers should be following?
Not that I can think of. I don't subscribe to any of these mail-out lists. I find having a good writing group who will critically look at your work and suggest, oh, well, such and such a publication is looking for submission, and that's great. But as far as professional networking in writing, I have done none.
Okay.
So
That's fair. Says the person who was, I think, shortlisted for Arts and Letters.
yes,
Yeah.
that was just, I saw they had an opening and sent in a piece. I was under consideration to work with Ed Greenwood, and that was just a right place, right time. My stories in Engine and other anthologies have just been, I randomly saw an ad somewhere, or a friend said, oh, hey, this is happening. I think you've got a story that could go in it, or I think you could write something fun for it. I've just relied on word of mouth and right place, right time
Wow.
for everything I have published. I've been very lucky that way.
That's incredible. As a writer, what would you choose as your mascot or avatar or spirit animal or Patronus?
Probably my little black cat,
Okay.
who is floating around in my house.
Okay.
If not, it'd be the much bigger, clumsier Tabby, who
Cool.
is also floating around in the house.
So a cat.
Yes.
Yep, that's fair. Yep. How many unpublished or half-finished books do you have?
Well, currently I'm working on a generational series that follows the family. I'm trying to think how to explain this one. Follows a family who started a freehold after an apocalypse.
Okay.
So it goes from the loss of technology to the rediscovery of magic, and the character I enjoy the most is the wastrel son, who's grandson of the original character, who is just a free trader floating about the world. I'm also working on, I've been calling it a modern day Trojan horse story that I don't want to give too much away, but it's a Trojan horse type story where they get in under, here's a gift and take over the country. So those are my 4 big ones right now, but then there's countless stories that start and stop, and I'm trying to limit myself to at least one of the 2 big projects, which is the 4 novels. And it's difficult because I'll work on one for so long and then there'll be another idea for something entirely new, or no, this would work way better in the Trojan horse, or this would work way better with the generations, or so. Yeah, did I actually answer your question with
You
that?
did.
Okay.
Okay. Shannon, do you view writing as a kind of spiritual practice?
I think every act of creation is in some way, if you want it to be. Sometimes writing is more therapy for me. It's just getting the guy who cut me off in traffic out of my head, or, today was a bad day at work. I need to get the anger at whatever went wrong out. Other times it is just an exploration, but I think every act of creation, of making something new to share with the world, is spiritual in the greater sense. No matter how ugly a piece of art is, or what kind of hatred or anger it deals with, it's turning something else into something new and hopefully beautiful that can be enjoyed by people. So I don't know if spiritual is the word I'd use as much as it's recycling negative emotions for me.
That sounds very spiritual. I like it. That sounds lovely.
I have trouble with spirituality.
Oh, okay. Shannon, have you ever read anything that made you feel differently or think differently about what fiction is and what it can accomplish?
Not so much about what fiction is, but I have read many things that have made me question how we think of the genres within fiction. When I was still in university, we were doing a course on comedy in ancient Greek plays, and the instructor came in one day and asked, so what is comedy? And the best answer I could come up with was not tragedy, because we define things by what they are, not so much by what they're not, more than we do by what they are. So saying this piece is fantasy, well, is there science in there too? Is there straight on fiction in there? Is it historical fantasy? Is it... So it becomes much harder when you look at larger and larger pictures of how does this fit into everything. So I find it really hard to define anything within fiction, but when you look at, okay, this is fiction, this is a made-up story, it can be told through verse, through movies, through books, straightforward prose. I find that one easy to get. But when you start breaking it down into mysteries and romance and fantasy, some of the best mystery stories I've read have been embedded in science fiction. Some of the best fantasy stories I've read have been marketed as mysteries. So it's getting into the small details of it. I find it very hard to define, but overall, I get it.
Okay. I like that.
That's a rambly answer, I know, but
No, I like that
it's a
answer.
hard one to discuss.
No, I like that. This is always an interesting one to test the vanity of people. We've had to do it on the air a few times. Shannon Green, have you ever Googled yourself?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Have you come up?
Not anymore.
No.
Right now, if you Google my name, you get a female soccer player.
Ah, okay.
Apparently, she's quite good. I
Okay.
don't follow soccer.
Okay. Shannon, is there anything that you love that you would give up in order to be a better writer?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
I'm always trying to be a better writer, but I don't know what there is for me that I could possibly give up. Like, I could give up certain foods, I guess, if I knew it would make me a better writer, but as far as truly loving things, I'm not going to give up my wife to write a better book.
I would definitely give up food in general. Like, if there was some operation you could do, or if I could get all my nutrients from a pill, I would definitely give up all forms of food if I could still live and get my calories a different way. I love to eat, but often it's a chore. I'd much rather be writing. It takes up a lot of my time. It's just the whole process is just ridiculous, and I'm shocked we haven't gotten scientists on that yet to figure out a way to sustain ourselves without food. You'd solve the hunger crisis in a moment.
I have days like that, but then I have days where, wow, that hamburger looks really good. Or, you know, who could actually live without pie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without pie?
Pie.
I could live without pie. I could never eat another pie again and never miss it.
No, you haven't had a good pie then.
That's your professional diagnosis that Matthew's never had a good pie. That's interesting.
Well, never had really good food. If you're willing to give up food, you haven't had some really good food.
I mean, that's fair. I really like carbonara. It's just wonderful and amazing and always feels good in my mouth. Nachos, I would have a hard time without. Burgers, basically anything that combines meat and cheese, I would have a hard time giving up. But at the same time, to be a better writer, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do get we spend so much time eating every day and it does get tiresome sometimes, but
As someone who works from home and writes from home and runs a business from home, even recording this from home, I just find that I wake up and I start my work day and I get caught up in the minutia of it in the day to day, and before I know it, I've forgotten to eat and I'm starving. I work on that, but what usually happens is I'll leave it going until I can't ignore it anymore, and now I'm in the middle of something important, but I physically have to go eat. At which point, I'm just going to make something very quick and unhealthy because I'm literally starving. So I'm not enjoying the food, and I'm also annoyed because it's taking me away from an important work thing that's going on at that moment. It's not good.
and I have been in those situations too, but my body always kicks in strong with, no, you have to eat now. Don't do anything else. Just go eat. And I enjoy food. If I wasn't doing my minimum to stay active, I'm sure I'd be a much larger man than I am.
You are a small man.
I enjoy food.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, well, thanks, Shannon. Here's another question. This one's interestingly phrased. Pay attention to it. Shannon, do you believe in writer's block, like as a concept?
I believe in not feeling inspiration. It's like anything else. I have days where it's much harder to sit down and write, and I have days where it's much harder to find the energy to go out and mow the lawn or shovel snow. They're all things that need to be done. And I think with writer's block, it's so many people don't see it as, okay, this is something I need to do to get through it. They see it as, Well, it isn't something that actually needs to be done, like mowing the lawn or shoveling snow. It's more of an option. So I think it's more, I'm not going to push through this. I'm having a case of the blahs today, and just letting it get to them. I mean, and I'm not trying to discount the words aren't flowing right today. The words just don't want to go together.
That happens to me a
Everyone
lot.
has, yeah, everyone has those days. Even people I know who don't write will have those days where it's, I'm trying to make a simple point, just a coworker, and I just can't make sense of, we need to buy more coffee because we ran out. And that's what writer's block to me feels like. So it's just, you force yourself through that. What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that the character picked up his jacket and put it on, but I can't come up with a good way to say that. So move on to what he does after he's put on his coat, which is probably walk out in the rain.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Me personally, I know it's going to be a real bad day, like a real bad day, if I can't spell anything correctly. Like in my head I can, but my fingers aren't doing it right. My fingers aren't hitting the right keys. I'm just not in the groove. I'm tired. I'm fatigued. I don't know what's going on, but I've written a few sentences, and when I glance back up, every single word has a little red line under it. Everyone's spelled wrong. So then I have to stop and go back and fix all of those words, and I might hit the wrong key again and just get really frustrated, and it's just destroyed the flow I had going, getting the story out, whatever I was doing. And it'll happen again and again, and eventually I'm just like, no, this is not going to work today.
And the days where I have that the worst, I let spell check take over until I've moved to the point where I can actually spell again. It might be a bad habit, but it does make editing much easier.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, Shannon. For you, it seems like you know what you're doing. But for you, what's the most difficult part of the artistic process? Either with the novels you're working on, or looking back on all the From the Rocks you've been in. You've been in Fantasy from the Rock, Chillers, Dystopia, now Flights. What's the most difficult part of the artistic process for you?
Getting it out of my hands and into somebody else's.
You mean like giving it to someone else to read, like a friend, family, publisher, editor?
Giving it to someone else to read, finding markets that want to buy what I've done, because I can sit at home and just write or sculpt or take pictures or do any of that. And if I'm not getting it to anyone besides myself, it doesn't matter what I've done. A comparison that comes really easily to mind, I know some amazing musicians that you will never see play live anywhere because they're too afraid to get up in front of people. And it's stage fright, it happens. They're amazing musicians, but no one will ever know it. And they want people to know, hey, check out this song I wrote, check out this really neat thing I can do with my piano. But because they can't get it out there to people, no one will ever know. And, like, yes, there's social media and we can share, but finding a way to get your work out where people can see it is still incredibly difficult. And to me, it's a big mental barrier, too, because I do have the stage fright when it comes time to show my work to people. Well, even submitting to Engine, and it's not as bad because I know most of the people at Engine, at least passingly. It's, okay, what are they going to think? Are they going to hate it? Are they going to love it? Are they going to just write back and tell me it's utter crap? Are they just going to set it on fire and ignore the fact I ever sent anything? It's, all this goes through my mind, and it's, like I said, for lack of a better word, it's stage fright about this neat picture I took that I just want to put on Facebook, or this story I wrote that I think someone might enjoy. That is, for me, the hardest part of anything creative I do, is showing people what I've done.
That's fair.
And the other hard part is finding people who want to pay for it.
Yeah.
Because, let's face it, it's great to do, but it's also nice to have extra money.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Shannon, if it helps for the next time you're submitting to an engine anthology, like a From the Rock or a novel or whatever, by the time we're done reading all of the From the Rock stories, we're ready to light them all on fire, regardless. Like, by the time you've read the same short story 80 times to pour over it, you're very done. You never want to see that story again. They're wonderful stories, but we hate them all equally.
Okay, that's good.
I've noticed when reading your stuff in the From the Rock series specifically that you always have really cool character names. So, Shannon Green, how do you select the names of your characters?
I've got a bad habit of a lot of them are synonyms for my own name, especially the main characters. It started as just a little joke, but I often will just run through Google and, okay, my name means green. It's a color.
Yep.
What else is green? So I'll look up synonyms for green or names that mean green. Sometimes the name just will be picked on something randomly around me, but it is kind of a running thing in my stories that has become a joke between myself and Lisa, that most of the characters are named after me in some way, and then friends who have picked up on it are just like, okay, which one is named after Shannon this time? So it's a little challenge to a lot of them too, to pick out which name means the same as Shannon does.
Okay, cool. Oh, wow, Shannon. That almost answers the next one, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you ever hide anything in your stories that only a few select people, like really noticeable readers, will ever find?
There's usually a black cat in there somewhere.
Oh, okay. Oh, right, yeah. All right. How much research do you put in before you start writing a story? What do you research? How do you research? How much time do you spend researching before you start a novel or a story?
Well, the research goes on as I'm writing, so I can't give a definite answer of how much research goes on beforehand.
Yep.
But it depends on what I'm writing. If it's a true fantasy world or a true sci-fi world, often the research is only as far as spelling and local flora fauna for the region. So if it's a full-on fantasy piece and I've put in something about spruce trees or birch trees, I'll look up, okay, does a birch tree actually do this? And then decide if it does in the world I'm writing or not. But I'm not writing a lot of real world accurate things, but then there's cases like my contribution to Chillers. That story was called The Wine Dark Sea.
Yep.
All the offshore knowledge and all the working at sea knowledge came from my experience of working offshore. So some would be specific to crews I worked with, some of the terminology, and some of it would be from my greater training that went into me getting those jobs. So it's a mixture of knowledge I already possess, and so some of it has been drawn from my schooling, my studies, and some of it has been, okay, what's that thingy called that we used for doing that one little piece of work, where I'll have to go back through either notes I took while I was working on it or a full-on Google search for, that thing that does the picture thing, and it'll be just as vague as that.
Yeah.
Because that's all I can remember about it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I encourage everyone to check out Flights from the Rock and Shannon's newest contribution to the From the Rock series in that collection. That's for sale on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold, also at Broken Books downtown. Thank you for coming on, Shannon, talking about things.
Thanks for taking the time to ask me about everything.
No, thanks for coming on, absolutely.
And pick up all the From the Rock.
Yeah, see much of Shannon Green.
Your hands on. Well, not just me, see other people too.
Nope, absolutely not. Only read Shannon, burn the rest.
Okay, I'll go with that.
All right. Have yourself a good day, Shannon.
You too.
All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.